All right, let's get started. I want to welcome everybody to the City of Littleton Planning Board, December 8th, 2014. Tonight we just have a resolution, and then we have some reports later on by staff. So we'll get right into it with roll call.
Board Member Bolt.
Present.
Chair Duzan.
Here.
Board Member Elrod.
Doesn't have
Here.
words for it.
Board Member Graham.
Here.
Board Member Moore. Board Member Renicki.
Present.
Board Member Samuelson.
Here.
Board Member Miles. And Board Member Schrader.
Here.
Do we have a quorum?
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes via video. And so need a motion to certify the minutes from the November 24th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a second. And so let's vote.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right.
Oh, you didn't get a chance to look at the date.
Something wrong?
Board Member Bolt
weren't
was
here.
not present. Did you have an opportunity to?
I did watch it, but I didn't think I was to vote if I wasn't here.
So do we remove his vote?
Yeah, he should not vote if he wasn't present.
The board member Bolt's vote does not count.
Didn't vote. He didn't vote.
Oh, you didn't? I'm sorry.
I didn't
look.
So the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we have scheduled and unscheduled appearances for any attendees who'd like to address the board on an item other than the resolution we're hearing tonight. And if you'd like to do so, please approach the bench, state your name, address, and
You want my phone number, too? No,
you're on the phone?
My name is Kent Bagley. I live at 1467 West Briarwood Avenue. And Chair and members of the board, I'm pleased to be here to make some comments tonight. I understand that you're going to be talking about the neighborhood plan process, so I wanted to come and make some comments about that. And I really come tonight wearing at least four different hats. Number one, I'm a Littleton citizen of 20 years, living in the Heritage neighborhood, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and also the chair of this planning board from 2006 to 2008, and RTD director from 2009 to the present time, and past planning director for the city of Aurora, and also had my own planning and real estate consulting firm from 1992 to about 2012. And what I really wanted to come and make some comments, it relates to some things that you're going to talk about tonight, but it relates to the neighborhood plans. I see that there are areas of stability and areas of change in the city of Littleton. And if I could be so bold to say that the areas of stability are really the residential neighborhoods throughout the city, and I don't think that they really deserve your focused attention at this time. Where there are areas of change, it's the station areas at Mineral and also at downtown. And I think that that should be more of a focus at the present time, as well as corridor plans. Plans for downtown Mineral, there's a Dr. Cog process, which I'm sure you're aware of, station area master planning process, where you're going to be getting some funds to do station area master plans at both Mineral and at downtown. I think that that is a critical focus, not to be left behind by what's happening in some of the other jurisdictions throughout the metropolitan area. Other communities are working on station area master plans either on their own or with funding from Dr. Cog. Those cities are Aurora, Lakewood, Westminster, Arvada, and Douglas County, just to the south. And all of these really are in areas where there are no commuter or light rail lines presently existing. We're not talking about the Southeast Corridor or the Southwest Corridor. And the present Fast Tracks plan covers about 58 different station area within the metropolitan area. That is a major focus. And I think Littleton has had light rail since 2000, and I really think that it's critical, absolutely critical, that the staff and the planning board spend a great deal of time over the next year and a half working on the station area master plans, which are going to have major impact for the city of Littleton within the context of the metropolitan area. And the fact that the effort on the part of the planning board should be to engage the citizens, everybody in the city, and the development community in what can be expected in these station areas, because they're going to have a major impact if they haven't already had an impact. So I'd really encourage you to not think about doing the Heritage Neighborhood Plan, but more focus on corridors and also station areas. Those are my comments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Pam?
I'm going to ask for the projector. Thank you. My name is Pam Chepborn. I live at Crestline, Nevada, in downtown Littleton, District 1. A month ago, I started to present my vision for Littleton. It was considered potentially related to subjects under discussion that night, so I thought I'd bring it back. I can talk about this for a really long time, and so I won't finish it tonight. But first, let me say I agree with Mr. Bagley for once. Hopefully there's more in the future, but I think we know from the breakfast with council that you're going to be redirecting to corridors and activity areas and the light rail stations. So I'm anticipating that. My vision says that we're not done with the comprehensive plan, and I'm not the only person to say that. So I hope as you get feedback from citizens as you go forward, we can consider this kind of approach. We have the great good fortune to have two different portions of the city already existing. And one of them is kind of what I'd call the north side, along Littleton Boulevard, maybe to Ridge. And the other one is the more modern area on the south side, kind of Ridge to Mineral and 470. And this is awesome. It's a great opportunity, and I don't want us to lose it. It gives us the best of both worlds. So we've got historic, traditional styles on the north side, mid-century, modern, and the previous century, and a modern lifestyle on the south side. And I'm going to extend this a little bit, jump forward and say, so that gives us a mineral station that can be high density, modern, stretched out along that corridor. But we can have a mid-century, that's 1900s, approach on the north side. And that means medium density in a stretched out area. So all of Littleton Boulevard from Broadway to Santa Fe and even west of there becomes a medium density opportunity to keep some historic style and lifestyle. So we offer both, and we have both in the city. I think this is hugely competitive for us going forward. I think it's a great thing. So it's very exciting to me. And this is an article from Denver Post in May. Old and small equal better neighborhoods, study finds. These tend to be the places that the big tech companies love to move to. It's a balanced mix of old and new, but it keeps the smaller scale or the medium scale. It doesn't go to high density. And again, we have the opportunity to do that here, do both. And that's a great thing. So North Littleton has historic preservation and design guidelines that we haven't developed yet. And I'm looking at you to work on that kind of things. I'm also going to mention last mile techniques, which is a known planning technique to connect the light rail and the last mile around it, the light rail station. And I'm not sure this hasn't come up in discussion. For some reason, Littleton keeps bringing study sessions to bear that are all high density around the station. And TOD is actually what you've been asked to look at. But I'm going to say, let's consider that last mile and stretch it out on the north side of the city. And just as a preview, I also think that we ought to be looking at the shortages of the next 40 to 60 years, which is water and energy. And I think if we plan that now and build some provision for it, we will be robust and resilient in the future and very attractive. So thanks for your consideration. And by the way, thank you for serving Planning Board. I don't know how you say it, but it's a large effort on your part, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
Hello. Dan Flynn, 6089 South Broadway. I didn't attend the breakfast meeting, so I wasn't aware of some decisions that may have you working more on the corridors. I did watch, I think, maybe last week's meeting. I appreciate a lot of the comments that some of you made, and I can imagine that that's the direction that you decided to go with council, so I encourage that. That was going to be what I was going to talk about here. The only thing I would add to the two previous speakers was that the small area plans themselves are explicit. They are specified on maps and shouldn't be confused with corridor plans or with neighborhood plans. There's also small area plans that need to be thrown in there and worked on quickly if possible. And that the small area plans should certainly be talked about before the corridor decisions on the widening of lanes, perhaps that's coming up later in the discussion with the City Council. I think that's a good example of a decision that might affect that small area. And so it would be a good idea to discuss the direction of the small area before moving ahead on any decisions on that small piece. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's it. Got all three of you. Okay, moving on to the public hearing for the resolution recommending approval of an ordinance amending Title 10 of the Littleton City Code to allow tobacco parlors and body art studios in the Community Business District B2, General Business District B3, and Central Area Multiple Use District CA, subject to conditional approval. Glenn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board members. I think it was just a month ago we presented this in a working session, got some of your comments. We did some additional research and additional outreach, and we've drafted an ordinance for you for your consideration this evening. So we started out by describing that presently tattoo parlors and body art studios are restricted to our industrial districts. Only in Littleton. And I think the idea was to push what was seen as a locally unwanted use as far into the hinterlands as possible because I guess we are used to thinking about tattoo parlors as something that serves bikers and other ne'er-do-wells.
Sailors?
And what?
Sailors?
And sailors. I wasn't going to pick on sailors, but I will pick on bikers. And as you know, the industry has really come around full circle. We see it as really there's also a connection between tattoo parlors and the creative arts, which is something that we see as a beneficial use in our downtown area. So there's a potential for that collaboration, and also whenever you're talking about creative arts, that spurs on economic generation as well. As I mentioned, this is only allowed in the industrial districts. We've had a couple of inquiries that would like to not just locate in downtown, but be in a more of a retail setting. So that's why we're bringing this forward to you this evening. We looked at a number of different communities. They all seem to fit into a certain pattern. Centennial actually allows them pretty much anywhere. They consider that as a personal use. So barber shops, hair salons, tattoos, body art facilities, all kind of are fit under that category of personal use, which is allowed in most commercial and industrial districts. Denver has a requirement that there be no more than 2 within 1,000 feet. And we've seen that in a number of communities, that they allow them in the retail districts, but they don't want them all clustered in one place. And in the purveyors I've spoken to, they agree 100% with that. They would just soon that they'd be spread out and not necessarily clustered in one location. And that's really the 2 requirements. So Englewood is still, their code is just like ours. It only allows it in the light industrial districts. We looked at a community in Arizona that also requires that 1,000-foot separation between similar uses, but then they also throw in liquor stores and adult uses and massage facilities as well. Westminster doesn't absolutely require the 1,000-foot. They just require that an application come in and you actually map the other facilities so the planning board can decide whether there's too many in one location or not. And then Wheat Ridge just allows it in commercial and light industrial districts without any requirements. There's also communities that require conditional use, and that includes Westminster, Wheat Ridge, Peoria, and Denver does not. So what we're recommending and what we recommended a month ago was to allow them in the CA. That's the Central Area Mixed Use District, so that's most of downtown. And then there's a portion of downtown that's B2. And then while we're at that level of commercial and industrial uses, the B3 district is our most intense commercial district and also allows industrial districts. So we threw that in as well. We are recommending a conditional use permit, so any tattoo parlor, body art studio that wants to locate in the city comes to you and gets approval of a conditional use, and then you are the final word on that conditional use. And what that does is give you opportunities to put conditions in place. And I think we talked about limitation on hours. And again, the business owner I spoke to actually closes at 8 o'clock. They are not open late hours because their artists want to go home as well, and they don't really want to get people when the bars close to come in and get a tattoo. That raises their liability. So that's not what they're about. But that gives you an opportunity to put conditions like that in place. And again, we want the standard of you can't be within 1,000 feet of another one. And that is a deal breaker. If you're within the 1,000 feet, they don't even have an opportunity to come before you for a conditional use. And that's something you might want to consider. Do you want, if somebody's at 988 feet, do you want to consider that as a possibility? But the way it's written right now, it's kind of a fast rule that it's 1,000 feet. You did want us to do some outreach. We mentioned we have this tool called Open Littleton where we can put questions out to the community, and those that are registered can give you an input. This isn't a scientifically significant poll, but at least shows that 15 folks were in favor, 8 said no, and 1 was neutral. And the question was, should the tattoo and body art studios be allowed to operate in the downtown or other retail centers around the city? And then if you look through the report, which we attached, what I found significant was anybody who voted yes, or a number of those that voted yes, made kind of some of the same common statements. Maybe they don't agree with tattoo facilities, but they think there's a place in our retail centers to have them. All the no votes, however, gave no reason. It was just no. So I think that perhaps says something. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the attached ordinance.
Why don't we go to public comment, because there's one person, and then we'll do the questions. So, Dan Flynn?
Thank you,
Yes, Dan Flynn, Broadway. I'm not against tattoo parlors. It asked one way or the other. It's just maybe in the wording. I was curious about transitional zoning. We do have transitional zoning in Littleton. I think it's a good zoning. I happen to recall that the wording is to provide a buffer between residential neighborhoods and busy streets. And it seems like tattoo parlors are a natural fit for that sort of location. And I was curious why that wouldn't be included in this ordinance. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Ma'am?
So again, I'm Pam Chepper and live at Crestline, Nevada. I live 3 blocks north of the proposed area where these would be. I don't think many of my neighbors know that this is happening, so I can't claim to speak for them. If I were proposing tattoo studios downtown, I would call my friends and say, hey, get on here and post. So as Glenn said, this is not scientific, the poll results. So I appreciate the city's attempts to constrain this type of use downtown. But I'm going to point out that we have now already 2 fairly large bars. The Tavern and Merle's are there, and the View House is going to open. As you know, that was approved, and the historical board approved the certificate of appropriateness. And they're a huge bar. So we have these 3 bars kind of bouncing off each other downtown, and already I'm unhappy about what that means for the future of downtown from my point of view. There's still a lot of residences there. You know from the downtown plan, maybe not personally, but from the plan, that a whole bunch of residences say, I want to stay. I have neighbors who say, I will not move. If they allow all sorts of development around me, I will not sell. So there's residences there who really want to stay. I understand that there are forces against that, but what's the nature of our downtown? Because right now it's going to bars with no parking and making it worse by adding View House. I don't like what's happening downtown. And I actually have nothing against sailors or bikers. They're all okay with me. They can be downtown, they can drink, they can eat. I'd rather they don't get tattooed there. Tattooing, it's not the people who get tattooed, and it's something else that's going on. Maybe if I say, yeah, there's a great applicant, and they close at 8. Well, you could add to the ordinance that these tend to close before the bars close, or something like that. But I'm worried about the character of downtown. It's supposed to be a gem, and I don't think it's going that way. I appreciate that this is a good vendor, but again, through 3 years, I guess I'd say, just because you have one applicant shouldn't mean that you make an ordinance for a whole bunch of sites. There's got to be a way for a waiver or an allowance for one rather than allowing many. Or in this case, like I say, maybe you could restrict the hours in the ordinance. So again, I'll just say I'm uneasy about this as a nearby resident, and thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that closes the public comment. And so I open it up to the board for questions. Ask Glenn questions, or we can do a motion.
I have a question. Give me a sense of how much is 1,000 feet in the downtown area, for example. Is it a block, 2 blocks, half a block?
Well, it's less than a quarter mile, so that would be, and if you remember, a half mile from downtown station goes all the way out past Santa Fe Road. So really with 1,000 feet, you would have one in the downtown area, the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
A city block, at least downtown, is 600 plus or minus 660.
Or
block.
300.
I guess it depends how they break it up. So, but yeah, Main Street is longer than 1,000, but you couldn't get 2 of them on there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're at
Unless either
each end, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's unlikely. One thing I didn't point out is you did ask about getting the merchants' input, and I did not present it, but we do have a member of our economic development staff who is on the Hoodlum board. I think they're a non-voting member, but she brought it up, and there was nothing but support from the board members at that meeting. I also talked to Greg Renke, who's the president of that group, also feels it would be a great use in the downtown as well.
Regarding the conditional uses, we talked about hours of operations. What other types of conditions would we be allowed to put on there? Would we be able to do things like the form of advertisement, or what are we really able to manage from a conditional perspective?
Yeah. And if you look at some of the comments we got from here, a lot of them had to do with, well, I don't have a problem with it as long as it looks nice. That's kind of hard to dictate, and when we talk about signage, that really has to meet the sign code, and we don't really dictate what the signage can say. I think it would be exterior impacts, so lighting on the outside, parking, those sorts of things could be conditions, hours of operation. Those are the main ones that jump to mind.
Can we limit the display of images in the storefront? Because typically with tattoo parlors that I've seen, all their art is plastered all over the windows, and that's something that to me it doesn't make it look good.
So you can't regulate the content of the advertising, right? Because of free speech issues. So you can't tell them that I don't want to see that type of picture, which is what I think you're getting
No,
at.
what I'm getting at is nothing on the windows.
But you would allow, I mean, we can't treat them differently because you would allow, like a liquor store has those things in there.
Well, I guess for me, the cleaner the better. You know, to me, when somebody says I don't mind seeing it if it looks nice. If you're a liquor store and you plaster downtown, say, and you plaster a bunch of stuff on the windows, I don't want to see that either. I want to see a nice, clean, just a sign and windows, and maybe you can see in it. But I mean, there used to be a recreational or a medical marijuana store where they allowed to put all their different strains of marijuana, pictures of them in the windows, if they wanted to. I suppose, from what you're saying, they were allowed to do that. Not that they did.
Yeah, I don't know the case, so I'd have to look at it. But I'm saying that if we want to get into regulating what their signs, what is on their signs, I think we're going to run into legal trouble.
Yeah, I guess I'm not referring to the sign that is their storefront sign, but stuff pasted to the inside of the window.
Yeah, and presently our sign code does dictate how much of the windows you can fill up with signage. There's a total square footage that's allowed, so we do have regulations in place for that sort of thing.
And that includes anything on the windows?
Well, I think what you're getting at, the question would be, is it art or is it a sign?
Right.
Which is pretty tough to decide at this point.
Yeah.
And we're assuming that we seem to be focused on downtown, but this could happen anywhere in the city.
Right.
And a lot of the city isn't regulated that tightly.
I guess I would ask that if the sign issue and what's hanging in the windows is a real concern to the planning board, that we table this matter and allow me to provide some advice to you via legal memorandum on those issues where I could flesh them out a little better for you.
Yeah,
if that's really what it's coming down to.
And I guess my only issue is just having it not look nice, I guess. So, and then, kind of along those lines, in the ordinance itself, can we add I guess I would rather see more verbiage in the ordinance, like is in some of the other ones, no adult uses within 1,000 feet, hours of operation, and then being able to come back with a conditional use request to change some of those things, rather than saying, well, this is in the ordinance, you can't even come and request a conditional use. My point being, I guess, that my point being that
Gavel.
if down the road, different planning boards years from now, who knows what's and different residents, all that. I guess I'd like to have more of a concrete direction up front, rather than just putting any use out there or anything out there, and then when they come with the conditional use, then having to think of things that they can't do.
So, for instance, like under paragraph R of section 2 of the proposed ordinance, so something that steers them to conditions may be added to address hours of operation, parking, those sorts of things that I talked about, but not necessarily say what those are, but just say these are things where you might get a condition.
Can't the conditional use process dictate hours of operation? I think we've done that before. Also, other items obviously can't be arbitrary, but so that could happen then rather than a concrete, you have to close at 8 o'clock, for instance.
Yeah, no, and I think what Commissioner Bolt is saying is just say the conditions may limit your hours of operation, not necessarily say what those limitation might be. Because, part of the reason for conditional use is to allow neighbors to come in here and tell you what they think too. And if they have an issue with customers parking in front of their house or whatever, then that gives you an opportunity to address those issues. But I hear what you're saying, that if there's some common ones that we think we need to address, we could at least give somebody a heads up in the ordinance.
Do we have other ordinances, or is it done elsewhere where you might have subject to conditional uses such as buffering, hours of operation, noise regulation, which we have an ordinance for, but where you can actually give them a heads up, like you said?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And distance between other uses as well. I don't necessarily have a problem with something being less than 1,000 feet. What if it's, like you said, 990 feet? It may just be an issue of where you measure from, the center to the storefront to the center of the other one, or and then other uses as well, like liquor stores. I'm not sure if massage parlors really, do those even exist anymore? It's more of spas now, right? You wouldn't limit that.
Yeah. And again, I think tying liquor stores to tattoos, I don't really see that.
I'm sure they're related activities.
Make one worse than the other.
What are some of the conditions that we have on the medical marijuana in downtown?
Oh, well, we have proximity to schools, proximities to parks, proximities to other medical marijuana. We have all those three, and they're requirements. You must meet those requirements.
And the requirements of medical marijuana are, as far as distance, is less than 1,000 feet, isn't there? Because there's one on Prince and there's one on Main Street.
Most are 1,000, and there's one that's 500, and I think that's from daycare centers. But let me pull up the ordinance real quick for you.
The other thing that I noticed about those particular, because I'm checking them out, there isn't a blinking sign that says come in, so were there requirements or conditions that they're not allowed to put? I think that's kind of what we're getting at when we're talking about signage. You don't want a big neon sign that says tattoo parlor here, medical marijuana here. So I don't see that in downtown. Is that because they didn't, or because there's a requirement or a condition that doesn't allow them to do it?
I think Kristen's pulling it up right now.
Okay.
So
Are you referring to neon lights and stuff?
Yeah, I'm blinking. Come and get your.
I seem to remember, maybe it's not Littleton, but perhaps you can't have the symbol of a marijuana leaf as a part of the advertisement.
Mark, do you have comments?
Yeah, well, not comments, but questions. Well, comments too.
Questions?
Don't limit
The
yourself.
1,000 square foot, any concern about eliminating competition? You know, you have one gentleman lady, whatever, sets up a shop in downtown Littleton. They basically got a corner on the market. So was there any thought on, the 1,000 feet being maybe, I know it exists elsewhere, but is it
Maybe that's too restrictive?
long? Yeah, too restrictive. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, certainly you look at the other examples that have 1,000 feet, a little bit bigger communities. I mean, maybe that's something you consider, and maybe you are able to allow some variation in that distance.
As part of that conditional use, we could switch it to, I don't know, pick a number, every 700 feet, every 500 feet, anything 5 to infinity would be on a case-by-case basis for the conditional use process.
I think you'd want to say generally 1,000 feet, or make a special case why it should be less or something.
Okay, make a case, all right.
Yeah.
The point was brought up about the transitional zone not being included, but I see that, you're not proposing it in the B1, which is the residential/business transition, business zoning. So if you don't allow in B1, I can't see you allowing it in the T district. It's just usually too close to residences for my taste.
Yeah, and the B1 district is really to kind of serve the immediate neighborhood, and I don't know that a tattoo facility really serves the immediate neighborhood.
Not enough clientele.
Yeah.
Back to the signage issue. I did a little investigating at two of my favorite liquor stores, and for scientific purposes only, but they're rather garish signage, and as I was going over there, I'm wondering, I know the city has signed ordinances. I wonder if they're enforced, and I do have a concern about the appearance of tattoo stores and parlors. And as you say, most of them, use a nice word, maybe they're a little garish. So could it doesn't sound like the conditional use process, you could get into specifics about tattoo parlors, and that wouldn't fly with, and not consider liquor stores or any other type of men's clothing stores along with it.
Right. When you talk about limit the message in a sign or the appearance of a building, it is kind of a free speech issue, even though it is a commercial issue. And I think that's what Kristen's saying. She'd like to maybe give you a little bit more direction from that standpoint. But I mean, that's something I did pick up from the public comments, is they're okay with the use, but they don't want it to scream at them either. So that might be something we want to look at in a little bit more detail.
Well, does the city go out on a regular basis and investigate signage and violations of the code? Too many flashing signs, more than the 200 square foot allowable signage, et cetera, et cetera. Does the city do that?
We mainly do it on a complaint basis. And then when we're out on a complaint, we look around at the neighbors too. So if we see a sign go up where there's no permit, that's usually the first indication that something's wrong.
Okay.
And you have a lot of grandfathered signs too. So it's a bit of a tough job. But no, do we have somebody going out every day and looking at signage? No.
All right. Last question. Where was it? You say you can't dictate the content. Could the conditional use process dictate the size, the amount of square footage that is distinctive from any other allowable use in a B2, B3 CA district? Or would that not pass?
That the
would
sign
that pass
amount?
legal? I'm sorry?
To limit the sign amount, you're saying?
Yes.
Boy, I guess I'm a little queasy about that just for what you say is the idea of conditional use is to limit those exterior impacts and then to say, but you get less signage. I'm not sure really they serve the same purpose, but it's something we can look at.
It's just a curious thing. I don't know if I'd go along with with enforcing it, but or even wanting it into the ordinance. Thank you.
Does the 1,000 feet apply across all districts or just the conditional ones? Does it apply in the industrial also?
Right now, it's anywhere it'd be allowed. So if you have one that's allowed in the industrial district and they go in without a conditional use and somebody wants a conditional use in a B2 district next door, they couldn't do it within 1,000 feet. So it would be between facilities, whether they're a conditional use or not.
But you could have as many as you wanted in the permitted districts.
If they're permitted, you can
That's
have.
right.
Yeah, in the I.
They don't have the 1,000-foot separation requirement?
You are correct. They would not, the way it's written now.
So down on South Park Industrial Zone, you could have
Whole
You
strip
have a
of them.
cluster
a whole
there.
line of them, you know, as if people hang out there. So there is the Harley shop.
That's
Goes
true. Got a point
together.
there.
So
Any other questions, comments?
To answer Chair Pro Tem's Elrod's question, the medical marijuana, the distance requirements are 1,000 feet from basically schools, parks, correctional facilities, other medical marijuana centers, and 500 feet from daycares.
500 feet from what? I'm sorry?
Daycares.
Okay.
And then the signage, they are to comply with the sign code, essentially. And then there are restrictions on the graphic image of a marijuana plant and the words marijuana or cannabis.
Yes, she is talking about marijuana shops.
This is specific to marijuana
Yes.
businesses.
So what this ordinance does not have, it says it limits its use within 1,000 feet of a similar use, but it doesn't have the additional limits next to a daycare center, next to a school.
Right, which would be something for you to consider if
Yeah.
you wanted to add those restrictions and if there were concerns.
Okay.
Any other, Kurt, you have anything?
Just to confirm, your thought was within 1,000 feet, there would not be more than two in the central area and downtown central area?
Well, Denver says no more than 2 within 1,000 feet. What I'm suggesting is 1,000 feet, only one within 1,000 feet.
One, but we would not be able to get to within the central area of downtown without
Just,
one being.
yeah, the dimensions of Main Street, I don't think you'd get more than one.
And in the ordinance, you said we cannot limit the hours in the ordinance, or is that just a recommendation we not limit the hours in the ordinance?
You certainly could. What I'm recommending is you not, and let, and consider each one as they come forward and tell you about their business.
And just a comment there, I counted at least 16 areas that are B2, B3 in the city, and I didn't really look very closely. So there are a lot of areas around the city where they could be located, not just in the downtown central area.
Ed, anything?
I don't have any questions right now.
Andrew?
I frankly don't have a power. I'm a market-driven kind of mindset on this. I don't think we should limit the hours. I think we should take the conditional use approach very much to that. I think setting something like 8 o'clock is counterproductive. I do like the 1,000 feet space, and I think that should be suitable throughout the city.
I actually just want to make sure I understand how this would work on the conditional use. So if a proposal comes forward that they want to put a tattoo parlor next to daycare center, could we decline that? No.
No.
Would have to be in the ordinance, correct, in order
Right, we'd want to put those distance requirements in. Now, you could put in conditions that limit that impact on the child care facility. Maybe they're not operating during school hours or something like that to limit that impact. But no, if you're concerned about that, we should put that in as a restriction now.
So I think we have three choices. We can table it. If there's a motion, we can amend it. If there's a motion, or we can have a motion to approve or deny.
I'd like to make a motion to table pending additional information on what condition we can, or a better understanding of signage and display, as well as giving us visibility to the different potential zones. So essentially, a heat map of all the different zones where these potentially could go, so we have a sense of whether or not some of those areas are close to maybe schools and other things like that.
Just for some clarification, so like we do with the medical marijuana centers where we can show where the schools and parks are?
Yeah, I don't know that we're ready to, and maybe it'll come out in that next meeting to say whether we want to put an additional limit that, like medical marijuana, but I think we at least want to have visibility to where the potential for this type of business could reside.
With the same things as the medical marijuana, or are you just concerned with daycares or schools or parks?
I think for purposes of ease of comparison, I would say like medical marijuana.
Okay, all of those restrictions.
Are there age restrictions, or what are the age restrictions on people who can be serviced by a tattoo parlor?
Yeah, at least the purveyor I talked to had a 18-year-old limitation, I believe.
I was wondering if that's whether that comes from the state, or that's is there any legal restriction, or whether that's the store's restriction itself, because it seems like that may make a difference on the way we view some of those restrictions compared to other schools or things like that.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know if it's a limitation from the state or that's their business limitation.
I think it's at least from the state. My daughter just turned 18 last month. That was the first thing she said to me is, "Oh, now I can get a tattoo."
Okay, we have a motion.
Should abstain then, huh?
Yeah, right.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, now we can discuss more if you want.
This is just a motion to table.
This is a motion to table to investigate further the conditions similar to a marijuana ordinance, or marijuana business ordinance.
Well, just a quick comment. It's a legal business. It's outgrown its nefarious past, let's say, and I think the 1,000 square feet is sufficient enough to control the number of tattoo parlors in Littleton.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess I'll comment. I mean, I'm still concerned about, if I go to, I've seen this mostly in mountain towns where you've got a real estate company and they plaster their window with listings, and I don't like that either. I like to have a uniform downtown where, there's not a lot of variation in signage in the windows and just filled up with junk, quote unquote. That's my term. So I'm concerned about the signage and what kind of restrictions we can put on that, and as far as that goes. As far as the 1,000 feet is concerned, I mean, I'm happy to consider less than 1,000 feet if somebody comes with a conditional use request. I don't think that should just eliminate that possibility. That's just, again, my opinion.
Okay. I have no problem with the business as being a business. I have no problem. I like the 1,000 square feet, the 1,000-foot separation distance. But I also don't have a problem with, taking a little more time maybe to flush out a few of the questions. I mean, it's the first time we had this ordinance, so it's not like it's a big urgency. So I would probably vote in favor of tabling it for more research. Unless there's any other comments, we'll go ahead and vote.
Ann?
Carries 4-3.
Okay. So we're going to get some more information and see it again. All right. That is all we have on the public hearing agenda. And we move into reports. So Glenn, I think you're up.
Sure, thank you. I thought I would maybe throw out a plan for the neighborhood plans at this point. And some of these things I think actually came from the planning board as well. I think Mark talked about a preamble. That's something that I noted when I went through it, is that there are common themes in all the different neighborhoods. Don't allow uses to encroach in the neighborhood. Make sure you deal with floodplains. Don't increase traffic more than what's absolutely necessary. Some of those themes. So what I would suggest is perhaps we do some kind of preamble that talks about those various common goals. One of the issues, and I think one of your speakers at the beginning of the meeting mentioned this, one of the things that's not real clearly defined is where those commercial corridors begin and end and where the neighborhoods begin and end. I made an attempt at the draft I showed you real briefly a couple of meetings ago that if it's shown as a commercial corridor in the map in the citywide plan that shows generalized zoning, that's basically a corridor, and it doesn't go beyond those commercially zoned properties. So that's something I think the board might want to consider, is where those two things begin and end. There is a lot of language in the neighborhood plans that says don't allow any commercial development or multifamily development to encroach in the neighborhood. But as you folks know, there is zoning there today that would allow certain uses that might appear as encroaching, but yet those property rights are there today. So we might want to address that issue. And then show the old plans with the strikeout language of all those things that we know are outdated and don't make sense anymore. And what I suggest, I think council said, don't have a neighborhood meeting at this point. And what I would suggest is we draft this perhaps draft document and we post it online. And we have Open Littleton where we can point people to and give them an opportunity to comment on it. We have Nextdoor that actually reaches out to the neighborhood associations. And then we could utilize our website as well. And let's let that permeate out there a bit, or percolate out, and see what other issues might come up. So we also just received a citizen survey. In fact, it's on for the council discussion tomorrow night. If you happen to be watching TV and want to watch Channel 8 and see the consultant who did the citizen survey. But I was kind of overwhelmed with 90% of the respondents said they love their neighborhood, basically. And then I think about Vice Mayor Beckman said, don't screw it up. And I kind of feel the same way. People do love their neighborhoods, and they think they are pretty great. So I guess that should be maybe our major theme. But I just throw that out for your thoughts and discussion at this point.
So after we, I'm trying to use the term that Debbie used, update the neighborhood plans. We're not changing them. We're just updating them, meaning we're striking out things that are outdated or cleaning up, some of the common policies across the different neighborhoods. So once we update that, once we post it, once we get feedback, then we finalize those changes, at that point, it does go to public comment because it comes forward as a hearing, correct?
Right. So the end result would be an amendment to the comprehensive plan. So that does require hearings with planning board and final action by council and adoption by resolution, basically.
And we can do this in phases, meaning we can adopt comprehensive plan version 2.0, which includes the citywide plan and the neighborhood plans updated. And then we'll do corridor or whatever ends up happening first.
Right.
Okay.
Not sure I understand the process. You talked about doing, and I mentioned before, doing a prologue of that would handle the general concerns of all the neighborhoods, traffic being one of them, encroachment, rezoning changes, encroachment of commercial, et cetera, high rise in the middle of an R1 area. And then I was thinking that after this prologue, eventually we go into each neighborhood and have that neighborhood meeting and solicit specifics for that particular neighborhood. And that's one phase. Another phase that we could do immediately would be to strike out obsolete points, language in the existing neighborhood plans, like, for instance, extending Gallup that occurs in, I think, 4 neighborhood plans. Is that what we're talking about doing?
Well, I guess
are you starting to combine this little house cleaning job and avoid having specific neighborhood meetings?
Well, I guess the way I would put it is let's do the house cleaning. Let's reach out electronically, and if we see specific issues come up in a certain neighborhood, perhaps we revisit that neighborhood. I guess that would be my difference.
Okay. And if there's not disagreement on the house cleaning, we don't need to go out into each neighborhood then for specifics on and revising the individual neighborhood plans?
That's what I'm recommending, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's what I heard from council now. We didn't get into a whole lot of details, but I think that's their concern is you'll create an issue perhaps like we saw where that wasn't the intent.
Well, that was a specific issue. We were torpedoed by misconception of what this planning board was wanting to do.
Right.
This is our job to go out into the neighborhoods and to review and revise the neighborhood plans.
Well, if it's something
it takes a lot of work and a lot of time, but
sure.
But I am with agreement with former Commissioner Bagley in that more critical importance is if we have time to do, and we have the time and the finance and the direction, we need to work on the corridor studies now, specifically the Santa Fe corridor study, and more specifically the mineral station study. That's just imperative we do that now. If we can't do that now, if we're twiddling our thumbs, then okay, let's spend some time with the neighborhood plans.
Right. And what I mentioned at council is I expect those to be kicking off February, March. So I really think by the time the board gets through the draft, kind of as I laid it out, we'll be into those corridor studies. So that's the other reason I think for this timeline. But if the board feels strongly to go another way, what I would recommend is going back to council because that's not what I heard on Thursday morning.
I guess I heard a couple of council members say that we should just whitewash the neighborhood plans and prioritize the corridor plans, and I would agree with the prioritizing of corridor plans. It just makes sense, especially with the 2 stations in town. But I disagree with not spending any time in the neighborhoods, and I don't have a problem reorganizing or reprioritizing, but I think we should eventually get to the neighborhoods and spend some time on them, especially ones where, we've never had a plan before.
Yeah, and when I gave you the work plan, there were a couple of exceptions, one being Trail Mark, because we don't really have a plan for Trail Mark, and Progress Park, I think, is one of those areas where it's a transitional neighborhood and does have certain issues that probably deserve a much more detailed look.
Glenn, let me ask a question on, we've got the studies coming up for the corridors and the station areas. Are we thinking we're going to make those into a plan, so the corridor is the plan, and take that corridor out of, let's say, Kettering Park neighborhood I'm looking at right now, from Ridge Road to Littleton Boulevard, it goes all the way to Broadway. So will Broadway not be part of Kettering Park neighborhood? When we say a half a block in is all the farther that neighborhood goes?
Yeah, I guess I would see Broadway as being a corridor plan. And where those lines are, I don't really know at this point.
But yeah. How do we say this is the corridor and this is what we're working on without including the neighborhood that's directly adjacent to it and for 35 years has been part of that plan? I mean, the way these boundary lines are drawn now, all of those corridors are part of the neighborhood plan. Littleton Boulevard and in any station is part of a neighborhood plan right now. So are we saying we'll separate those from the station plans or the corridor plans and make them specific parts of the comprehensive plan excluded from the neighborhoods?
Yeah, I don't know if is there a real formal geography now that says where one begins and the other doesn't?
Well, they're pretty hard and black lines. I always assumed that was the neighborhood, including up into
including the corridors as well.
Half of the street that it was adjacent to at Littleton Boulevard.
I think if you read the neighborhood plans individually, they're kind of fuzzy. They don't really get into, say my neighborhood. The plan doesn't talk about specifically Littleton Boulevard in any great detail. It kind of alludes to, keep the commercial from intruding further to the south into Aberdeen Village, et cetera. So that's the way it's kind of set up now. There's kind of that fuzzy connection. It's not concrete.
But it doesn't specifically say this is not part of that neighborhood.
Doesn't specifically say. It's just kind of.
There's never been a plan in the comprehensive plan that says this is the Littleton Boulevard corridor plan. So it has to be delineated.
Well, there was a Littleton Boulevard corridor study. It was never accepted.
Yes.
Right. But and it did have what do you call it? Limits, parameters. But again, the neighborhood plans, it's pretty fuzzy. It's always been that way. It's kind of implied that we have our corridors and then we have our, a block or so in, as you're saying, is the neighborhood.
Well, in my opinion, the corridors and station areas are interconnected to the neighborhoods, and you can't separate them completely without having discussion about both of them at the same time.
Not completely, but you have to. I guess the only alternative is to do them both at once or something. You'll do 4 neighborhood plans and Littleton Boulevard corridor study at exactly the same time.
I think at one time when we had that charrette or we drew the boundaries or we kind of circled activity areas, we talked about redrawing the corridors and the neighborhoods where they came together so that there was at least a line where, for example, on Broadway, it's generally the first row of properties that are business, and then beyond that is residential. It's not 100% that way, but so it seems like there needs to be at least a map that begins to say, okay, when these corridor studies occur, this is at least a preliminary boundary that we would give a consultant for.
That's this map.
Yeah, so are the lines on this map, do they follow specific zoning that applies to maybe a corridor type use, such as commercial. We don't have enough detail on that map, but it does seem that one step in this process is to begin to say, okay, these are the corridors. It's not to say that the neighborhood still doesn't go to the Broadway line, but at least there's a map that says, okay, here's the area of overlap and common concern. Because right now, the maps in the 1985 plan, they don't really differentiate between residential and commercial corridors, which I think is a critical differentiation when talking about those areas.
I think this is pretty close. I mean, I'm just eyeballing it, but maybe it's, some due diligence that we need to do to make sure that what's outlined here in blue, in fact, is the commercial zoning.
Yeah.
From what I can quickly see. So I think it's just, so I think what we're asking is if we're going to identify corridors, transit areas, station areas, those are the two studies that we're doing, then let's be very clear of both that the corridor plans are these blue lines and that the station area plans will cover an area, I don't know what this distance was, if it was 1 mile from the station.
Yeah, in diameter, right? Half mile around the station.
Mm-hmm.
But won't we define an area that the consultant will focus on, or will we let them come to us and say, we think this is the area?
Usually we say typically a station area plan is at half-mile radius, but there may be reason like railroad tracks where a half mile doesn't make sense. So it's kind of a walking distance usually. That's how they define it.
That the people that are adjacent to that area, that corridor, are going to be the most impacted by that corridor. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have their input prior to the corridor plan being approved, then I think we've missed the boat. Then we can't go back and say, well, we'd like to have this neighborhood, a greater buffer in the neighborhood from the corridor.
Well, one of the good things about the station area plans, which hopefully may become also a corridor plan, if we can fit that in, is that they will be doing public community involvement. And so we will be getting comments from the communities who will be affected.
What's their public outreach? Do you know what they have? I mean, do we even know?
We don't know until we hire a consultant. The way we have it right now is proposed to us the most effective outreach program. I mean, what I've seen is at least 4 more workshop type meetings are held on most of the corridor studies I've looked at.
Before the corridor study is finished, we're talking about the end of next year?
Right. They're about a year each. Now we're hoping to save some time by grouping them together to a certain degree, the downtown and the mineral station. But it'll be about a year, I'd say 1.5 years, 2 years is what we'd really be looking at. Now we might be done with mineral prior to that, but by the time we're done with the downtown station, probably be a 2-year.
Are we just going to put all of our work on hold until those are completed, or do we do anything on the?
Why can't we do both at the same time? We're hiring a consultant. They're doing the heavy lifting. We're reviewing, editing, commenting, et cetera, during, say, the mineral study. In the meantime, while the heavy lifting is being done by the consultant, we can be, say, tackling the neighborhood immediately to the east.
Exactly.
And then mesh the two. I think that's what you're after.
That's what I'm
after. That's a good point.
Yeah,
so where do you start? You do this or you do that? No, you do both.
Do both, and you got to continue working forward on the neighborhood plans, waiting till something happens in the station area plans or the corridor plans, and I'm assuming there will be some direction to that consultant to say, come back to the planning board to give them at least an update at some point in your.
Right, on their specific charge. They won't necessarily take on the neighborhood plan too.
Right, but just to keep us updated on a regular basis, whether that's once a month or once every other month, on what your progress is.
I mean, remember, the reason we started the Heritage Neighborhood is because we kept canceling meetings, that we didn't have anything to talk about. So we said, well, we have a plan to put together here, so let's start working on the neighborhoods. And again, the reason we chose Heritage was because it was the easy one, so we were testing out our process. So I think we're kind of in the same place now where we're saying, and we've always known there's going to be a corridor study, there's going to be a station area study, but we said until those things happen, how do we still stay actively involved and proactive in developing our overall comprehensive plan? Now, while we're talking about the board time and we're talking about the consultants, I think the ones in between are the city staff. And so it's really a question for what's the staff's capacity to manage consultants, the board, and this process overall. I don't think we can just put each piece in a box and say this is being done by the consultant, this is being done by the board without, I mean, you're kind of the hub to that. And I think that's where the pull of resources or the strain of resources may exist.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that too, but I don't really know until I see what their work plan is and how much we're involved in that.
Who's developing that work plan? When you say what that work plan is?
Well, I'm talking about, so we send out an RFP and we say this is basically what we require done. And there is a time limit on it based on the federal funding. And they give us a plan of how that's going to be accomplished and how much that includes special meetings with you, special meetings in the neighborhood, whether that's something that we're setting up, because it's not a lot of money, believe it or not. It's not a lot of money for these kind of things. So there's a certain amount of those staff might take over certain aspects of it as well. And I don't know what that is until we get a really good consultant with a really good idea, and maybe our role is limited, but maybe it's robust in order to get a really good firm and a really good public outreach program.
Sounds to me like there's two big efforts. First, I think everybody's in agreement to do a house cleaning of the current neighborhood plans. I think it's probably pretty, well, it's not straightforward, but it's fairly clear as to what policies are outdated and ones that are irrelevant. I wasn't exactly on board with, you handed out a summary of some ideas.
Yeah.
I thought some of them were a little too broad, too kind of generic, but that was just a throw out. So that, I think we're all in agreement there. Probably putting it on the web for public comment and review, possibly even having a couple public hearings to give citizens an opportunity to review or comment. Then the second phase, I think we're still a little fuzzy on how to get these neighborhoods done in terms of how to get individual neighborhoods an opportunity to voice their thoughts. And I think it's still a challenge, and I personally think that if we can figure out a way to do it efficiently without a lot of controversy, to be able to still do that. So what I'm suggesting is that with kind of this broad plan in place, that we do have a study session at the beginning of the year, because we are going to have to go through and agree or not agree on what is not relevant and outdated, and review a draft of a cleanup. But then we're going to have to really, as a board, decide, if we're committed to the neighborhoods in the way that we're talking, how are we going to do it with the resources we have, with our time, and not get too complicated and too drawn out. So any other comments on that approach?
Well, let me give you my vision of house cleaning means it's a little, the dirty dozen, a dozen strikeouts of wording in the code, not an exhaustive study, but we're talking about a minor house cleaning, get rid of the more offensive items, period. That's it. Mm-hmm. I think we can do that in a month, not counting public hearings and a formal vote. So, and I'm with you. I'm still fuzzy on, how do we get past, I agree, we should do this prologue. We can do that before, say, February or March, whenever we start the corridor study or the mineral study. Work on that prologue, and I think that'll crystallize. Then we can crystallize our thinking as to how to proceed. Do we go into the neighborhoods eventually, case by case basis?
Yeah,
and we can string that out for 5 years if we want. They don't have to be done.
True.
If we get bogged down with corridor studies and area studies, et cetera.
Yeah, I think you have 2 months of writing that prologue and doing the edits to all the individual neighborhood plans. But quite frankly, that's enough to probably keep you busy till we're into the corridor studies. Council did talk about additional study sessions. So we do the amendment and we think about what the best process would be. We have another study session with council, and by that time we would know the timelines on the stationary plans as well. So I think, January, February, let's look at editing the old language and coming up with that prologue.
Does that sound like a good plan? Okay,
Yep.
it's a plan.
Now, a sensitive issue. Your next meeting is December 22nd. Do you want to utilize that meeting to start this effort?
Yeah.
One less shopping day at the malls.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Right.
I have a couple. I'm fine with that. Based on the approach that we talked about earlier, that we're going to make edits, we're going to post it to both Nextdoor and Open Littleton. We'll get feedback online. I think another way that we could get feedback is can we do it by mail-in as well? So whatever we're posting online, can we do?
Like a survey?
Mm-hmm. For those, again, to capture those that may not go online, so that, again, it's a fair process and it's a fair demographic representation.
Yeah, well, we could certainly look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's mailing to 19,000 households, but.
Or can you do like a sample size? Would that be, figure out what is a statistically valid sampling?
Yeah, I guess then we would
It's
probably
cost
look
profit
about a whole
prohibitive.
research design and what that is.
Oh.
That's all. I mean, either everybody or you have a professional that go out and figure out what that sample size would be and who that is, and I don't know.
Okay.
But we've got some time to think about it the best way.
That would be my ask. I just want to make sure that it's demographically representative of the areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's fair for just about every neighborhood. Two that I want to point out in particular, Progress Park is a high, and that one is a neighborhood that is in an urban renewal financial mechanism area, so that we know is going to have a lot of activity. It's already getting a lot of pressure. So I do think that one we need to make more of a concerted effort, and we can even talk to council about that. I'm sure Jerry's going to be fully supportive of that. And Heritage, so just to go back to Heritage, we got a lot of public input, and it was good. So that one I think we can finish. I mean, I think it takes some editing and some writing and some studying of the comments, but we've got a lot of information from that one meeting. So I don't know why we would not utilize the information in that effort and just complete that one. I mean, we're 70%, 80% there.
Yeah, council even said, go ahead and complete Heritage. Just
Okay.
with the information we have.
Yeah, I read through those comments too. Yeah, I guess the main one that's new to our plan is move the high school, but that's, I mean, but okay, yeah,
Out of our
let's,
hands.
I think I sent
Simple.
that out to everybody. Read through it again and see if there's additional objectives that can be added from those.
Well, in the next 2 months, can we do our little house cleaning task, our prologue task, and then dive back into Heritage if we're not hot and heavy and
Yeah, I'm fine.
to the
That's a good
minerals.
approach, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not-
Prologue, edit. That's what you said, right?
Sorry?
Prologue and edit.
But you could,
He said
house
edit
cleaning,
first.
prologue,
Cleaning, prologue.
and
And heritage.
if we have time,
But the fact that we have comments, we would house clean with those comments in mind.
It's a bit
they're
more of a
obvious.
house clean, I guess, with heritage,
Yeah.
considering the input you had from October 2nd.
I'm not clear of what prologue is, but I guess we can, I think I know where you're heading with this, but I'm not sure that I'm completely, I don't see how it's going to fit into this. I know you had, Glenn suggested it would be yet another goal in here, in the citywide plan, I think.
Yeah, but I think we're beyond that.
Okay.
I think
All right,
that
so it'll be
idea's been-
something else to be determined what that looks like.
Yeah, I think it's just trying to reach all those commonalities that are restated in each of the 9 plans and trying to group that into a common statement for them all so that you reduce those
So it's
conditions.
almost the
I think.
introduction to the neighborhoods. It's going to be set on these principles, and then we'll just keep some individual policies within the neighborhoods, but
Yep.
there's some common. Okay.
Right.
Well, the current neighborhood section has the same thing already. Wait a minute. I
Everyone
spoke before I
says-
thought. It goes right into the Centennial neighborhood. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
There's something that talks about the process they went through to write those originally, that's in there somewhere. But there's not really a common statement for all the neighborhoods.
it sure gets rid of a lot of repetition, and
Yeah, I think that's the idea.
that's the
Read
idea.
through.
And treating them all the same, too.
The other area, I'm not clear on the corridors, so I know we're getting funding for the station area plans, and we said for the Santa Fe corridor, we're going to look to combine the Littleton station and the Mineral station and the connection between the two and the corridor, which we call Santa Fe corridor, but we're wanting to incorporate that into the RFP. But what about the Littleton Boulevard corridor and the Broadway corridor? There's no.
Yeah, I don't have a plan for those, quite
We
frankly.
don't have a plan for those.
I'm really thinking future budget years,
So 2016?
potentially, yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot to take care of.
The good
Plus
news
the
is
code.
you're an exempt employee, aren't you? Overtime doesn't matter.
That's
to you.
true. I'm working at about $23 an hour at this point.
Nice.
Just got a raise, huh?
And our next time to meet with council, they said quarterly, so it was December. When did we meet with them? November, December, January, February.
November 24th.
So February, March
No,
timeframe.
December 4th. You met.
Yeah, and we'll try and pin down that date, as staff does a calendar. I don't know that we've gone very far into 2015 yet, but as soon as we get out a date, we'll get that out to you.
Okay. Do you remember anything else I had in my email? Because I don't remember what I wrote a couple of days ago. We talked about the heritage plan. We talked about how we're going to approach the neighborhoods.
Oh, you had a comment about whether the council was going to rewrite the
Oh.
heritage or not.
Yeah,
We're going to do it.
I heard Debbie say that council was cleaning it up and then running it by planning board. So that, I heard that incorrectly. Then
What was that? I'm sorry.
So I wrote down from Debbie that council would clean up and send to planning for review.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
No, I didn't hear that.
That would be nice.
I was surprised to hear that, and I didn't get to ask her to
Wishful
repeat
thinking.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
She meant staff, right?
I think she needs staff. Globally speaking, council will do that, yes. All right. One thing I did want to mention is actually Karina brought forward an opportunity for continuing education. It's about Aurora's Opportunity Triangle, and there's a meeting coming up on December 12th. So that's next week, right? Or that's this week?
This week.
Friday.
It's December 11th and 12th, so it's Thursday and Friday, I think.
Right. So if we can send out information to you, we'll Oh, you already have. Ann already has. If you'd like us to sign you up, we will do that. It's Main Street Approach, Economic Restructuring 101. The art of doing business. Do businesses and artists in your district have a business plan, an artist statement, and a fair pricing structure? So it's kind of interesting. It ties in a little bit to what we talked about. And
that's an all-day event.
I think it's 2 days, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to
7:45
Fridays.
to 5.
I'm going to Fridays.
So let us know, and we'll sign you up for that. Is there anything else? I don't think so. Nope, that's it from staff.
All right. So we are meeting December 22nd.
December 22nd.
But is that going to be a study session?
I think at this point, well, the only other thing would be this tattoo ordinance, but I think I'd rather meet in the room next door, so we'll probably set it up as a special meeting or a study session. I don't know that we'll be ready with the tattoo ordinance.
So one requirement is you have to bring 10 cookies.
Whoa.
Of your choice.
I can do that.
Wow.
It's Christmas. Holiday,
Santa
sorry.
Claus suit.
The old planning
have-
commission, every retreat, you had somebody, the junior member had to bring double stuffed Oreos, not regular Oreos, but
Wow, I like
specifically
that.
double stuffed. And it was a demand, not a request.
Or the treat of your choice.
No, I say we go back to the good old days here.
Okay.
You know, it'd be interesting in the meantime if I suggest board members take out a copy of the code and strike out the dirty dozen and send their suggestions to you.
We'll send you each a draft of the way it is, the neighborhood plans.
We can do it electronically. That would be wonderful.
We'll send that out to you
And compare
All right.
notes at
Oh, yeah, just make a laundry list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
not, it's a quick read. Believe me, it's not going to take you a long time to get through them. Would you agree? I mean,
Okay. We're adjourned.